Welcome back to another video. In this video we are going to take a look at parameters and arguments and how they are used as part of Python functions. Let's have a brief look at what parameters and arguments are. Parameters are placeholders defined for values that the function will require, and arguments are values or information that we specify in place of that parameter, and these values are passed in as arguments. So you can see it as a parameter is the variable or variables listed inside the parenthesis within the function definition, and an argument is the actual value or values that were passed to the function when we call it. An argument could be any object as well, such as a string or an integer, etc. And below I have an example in red where we define the function. We can see the parameters in blue in the parenthesis after the def keyword. Def, by the way, stands for define, which we use to define the function, and then the function name, which is profit. So def profit, and in blue are my parameters, profit underscore 1 and profit underscore 2. And in this function we are basically adding profit underscore 1 plus profit underscore 2, and then we are printing total underscore profit to the screen. Now further below we've got profit, and then in brackets we've got 30 and 40, the values 30 and 40. And when we call upon the function we specify the arguments, which are the actual values, which in this case we call upon the function profit. And in here we specify our arguments, which are for the parameters. So we need two of them because we've got two parameters. And these will be our values for profit underscore 1 and profit underscore 2. So let's say I have two businesses, and the first business made 30 euros or $30 or £30. And then my business 2 made 40. So I can put these values in here, and the output will be the result of the two values added together. So as we can see, parameters are essential in Python functions because they allow functions to accept input, making them more flexible and reusable. Now I have a more simplistic example of a function without parameters versus the same function with parameters. So on the left is a function without parameters, and on the right is a function with parameters. So we can see a very simplistic use case, and it may help you make more sense of it. So on the left we are greeting people, and the greeting is generic, which says hello people, and this function cannot be customized. So we have def hello, and then we do not have any parameters used, and then we are printing hello people to the screen. And when we call upon the function, the output is hello people. Now using the same function with parameters, or we can see it as enhancing the functionality, on the right hand side we use a parameter inside the parentheses called name. So now that we have this parameter in place called name, we need to specify one argument every time we call upon the function, and then we print hello, and then we have specified our parameter again, name. So now it knows it needs to fulfill this parameter with an argument every time we call upon this function. And when we have called upon the function, we specify our arguments. So I can specify names in place of the parameter, which is Jack and Jill. So I've specified people's names, Jack and Jill, and we can see the output is hello Jack and hello Jill. So these are two very simplistic examples. On the right it's about greeting people using their names, and on the left is about adding two values together. Let's have a look at some live examples in PyCharm. And now we are in PyCharm. I'm going to paste my first bit of code, which is our user ID function. So in our previous video on functions, we created a function called user ID where the user can specify their name and age. But let's say we specified the name and age for the user. So let's remove the two lines requiring input from the user. Now if we defined a name called Jack and the age of 40, it runs as expected. We can see Jack is 40 years old. But then what if we needed more users and their ages as well? So let's paste in another user ID. And now we have Jill, and she's 30 years old. So let's run the file, and we see Jill is 30 years old. Using the function, it's printed out the last variable name and age. So this does not work really. So it's printed out Jill at age of 30. It's not printed out Jack at age of 40. So what we do instead is we define and use parameters and arguments. And a parameter is the variable listed inside the parenthesis in the function definition, and arguments are the actual values that were passed to the function when we call it. Again, an argument can be of any data type, such as a string or an integer. And the way we do this is we remove these variables, and in the parentheses we can specify our first parameter, name. And then when we call on the function here, user underscore ID, inside the parenthesis, we specify our value, Jack. Now if I run the file, I've got an error because age does not exist. So I need the additional parameter of age, and we add another argument, our age, 40. Now let's run the file again. And this time it says, perhaps you forgot a comma, which I have here. So let's add a comma and run the file one more time. So now I get Jack is 40 years old. So one thing we have to bear in mind, if we have two parameters, we have to have two arguments. So if I remove 40 again and run the file, we can see it's complaining here saying missing one required positional argument, age. Because it knows about this, it exists within the parameter itself. So again, we need to add age with a comma, and it runs. Now we just duplicate this line, and then we can specify the user ID for Jill and run the file again. And we can see Jack and Jill has been printed to the console. So this time it works fine. Now we can create lots of these user IDs like we just did for Jack and Jill. And so this is one example of how we use parameters and arguments. But let's have a look at one more example. Let's have a look at the examples I've been using in previous videos, which is about profit. So adding two numbers together. We have a function called profit, which is in our parameters. We have profit1 and profit2. And what do we do with profit1 and profit2? We store it in a variable called total_profit, and we add them together. Profit1 plus profit2 would be stored in the variable total profit, and then we will print total_profit to the console. Now again, if I miss one of the arguments, we can see we will get the same error. So if I put in 40 again, so that's our first profit, our first argument 30, and our second profit, our second argument of 40. Let's run the file, and the result is 70. And that's a high level overview of parameters and arguments.